right, hello everybody. We're going to go listen to Evelyn Underhill on mysticism, the study in the nature and development of spiritual consciousness. And I just had dinner over here by the beach, and so I'm going to walk over here. I'll do the intro while I'm walking over and scouting out a place. We'll see. Hopefully this mic works. I just tried out a couple mics. The ocean's right here, and so I wanted you guys to get the view, but if it gets really cold, I'm going to run back to my car. And by run, I might mean walk, so we'll have to discuss something in the middle of that. It's a cute dog. All right, so it's kind of foggy tonight, so I don't even know how much we'll see. But we're on Voices and Visions. Okay, so Evelyn Underhill influenced C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and Charles Williams, and she's just so knowledgeable on how people develop the mystic consciousness and how to do that in a safe way. Oh look, I think these girls are going to prom over here or something. I don't know if you can see them. They're all in fancy dresses. Anyway, okay, so I'm in Southern California. I have a playlist for this book. You're welcome to just start here. Just trust that you got here for a reason. On this video. I welcome you to be really present. One way to develop your mystic consciousness, certainly, is to learn how to just be deeply present. And your egotism will think you have to do all of these complicated things. But she's so talking about just all these. She mentioned St. John of the Cross and Suso and St. Teresa of Avila and all these other people. No, I go on this walk over here, but I haven't gone here in a long time, so we'll see. Here's the ocean, about 100 more steps. So, one bench is already taken. Let's see. I don't want to disturb other people. People come here. Oh, look, I'll show you the view while we're walking up to it. I get to see it. You want to see it. You'll think I'm just FaceTiming. I'll go down by the statue, maybe. Look, it's the harbor. It's in Southern California. It's a pretty cool view. All right, if we could see the sun, it hasn't set yet. All right, so let me think if there's anything else I can, I put the description of her in my description box and the link. There's a lot of people on this trail. It's a weekend night. I might hop the fence and just sit on the dirt. It's probably not a good idea. All right, well, maybe this was the view, and I'll start talking here until someone comes. I'll let you guys see the ocean. There you go. All right, so we're finishing the chapter on Voices and Visions. I know that because I was reading it last night for us, so it's fresh in my mind. Let me set this. All right, let me grab the book. might just go back to the car so we're not interrupted. But stay with me. Just fast forward, or I'll edit this if it gets too long. Don't worry. I really will. You guys are worth it. Okay. People are sort of weird around here anyway. They're not going to care if I'm reading. I'm just saying they're like beach people are pretty laid back about stuff. I'm not saying they're super weird. Okay. So we were interrupted by a security guard last time. I thought it was one page after this. Okay. So it says, in the last 2 lines of this wonderful passage, this Dante passage, the whole philosophy of vision is expressed. It's an accommodation of the supersensible to our human disabilities. A symbolic reconstruction of reality. This symbolic reconstruction is seen as a profoundly significant, vivid, and dramatic dream. And since this dream is directly representative of truth and initiates the visionary into the atmosphere of the eternal, it may well claim precedence over that prosaic and perpetual vision which we call, quote, the real world. In it, as in the meaningless dreams of our common experience, vision and audition are often combined. Many of the visions of Saint Matilde of Hackborn are of this complex type. Thus, she saw in the heart of God, as it were, a virgin exceedingly fair, holding a ring in her hand on which was a diamond, which incessantly she touched the heart of God, with which, I know I read this part. Moreover, the soul asked why that virgin was thus touched the heart of God, and the virgin answered, I am divine love, and this stone signifieth the sin of Adam. As soon as Adam sinned, I introduced myself and intercepted the whole of his sin, and by thus ceaselessly touching the heart of God and moving him to pity, I suffered him not to rest until the moment when I took the Son of God from his Father's heart and laid him in the Virgin Mother's womb. Another time she saw how love, under the likeness of a fair virgin, went round about the consistory, singing, Alone I have made the circuit of heaven, and I have walked on the waves of the sea. In these words she understood how love had subjected to herself the omnipotent majesty of God, had inebriated his unsearchable wisdom, had drawn forth all his most sweet goodness, and by wholly conquering his divine justice and changing it into gentleness and mercy, had moved the Lord of all majesty. Okay, so I know I read this. Hold on. I'll just keep going with there. Okay, I don't remember the other part ahead, so. Because he's particular. Hold on, there's just people walking by, so we'll just go with their conversation for a second. Imaginary vision of this kind is probably far more common than is generally supposed. And can exist without any disturbance of that balance of faculties which is usually recognized as sane. In many meditative persons it appears involuntarily at the summit of a train of thought which it sometimes illustrates and sometimes contradicts. The picture may show itself faintly against a background of mist, or may start into existence sharply focused, well lighted and alive. It always brings with it a greater impression of a reality than can be obtained by the more normal operations of the mind. B. The symbolic and artistic character of these visions we have been discussing is obvious. There is, however, another form of imaginary vision which must be touched on with a gentler hand. In this, the imaginary seized upon by the subliminal powers or placed before the mind by that somewhat other of which the mystic is always conscious over and against himself is at once so vivid, so closely related to the concrete beliefs and spiritual passions of the self, and so perfectly expresses its apprehensions of God, that it is not always recognized as symbolic in kind. A simple example of this is the vision of Christ at the moment of consecration at Mass, experienced by so many Catholic ecstatics. So right when they consecrate the bread and the blood, I think she's going to say, into Christ. Oh, that's the fourth time I saw that guy, I think. Another is the girls in the dresses are coming here now. I don't know if they want to be on my video, but I'll just show them from a distance there. Another is a celebrated vision in which Saint Anthony of Padua embraced the divine child. Saint Teresa is one of the few mystics who have detected the true character of automatisms of this sort. Just a second, they're falling on their heels. I'll get the backs of them if I can. It's pretty. It's like a procession, you know. I take what we get, you know what I mean? I think that sometimes it has a meaning for being here, wherever, you know, because I've never been here on these videos before for the book. All right, so St. Teresa is one of the few mystics who have detected the true character of automatisms of this sort, which bring with them, like their purer forms, the intellectual visions of God, a vivid apprehension of personality with a capital P, right? The conviction of a living presence, rather than the knowledge of new facts. Now and then, she says of her own imaginary visions of Christ, it seemed to me that what I saw was an image, but most frequently it was not so. I thought it was Christ himself, judging by the brightness in which he was pleased to show himself. Sometimes the vision was so indistinct that I thought it was an image, but still not like a picture, however well painted. And I have seen a good many pictures. It would be absurd to suppose that the one bears any resemblance whatever to the other, for they differ as a living person differs from his portrait, which, however well drawn, cannot be lifelike, for it is plain that it is a dead thing. This vision, she says in another place, passes like a flash of lightning. The word image here employed does not signify a picture placed before the eyes, but a veritable living image, which sometimes speaks to the soul and reveals great secrets to her. It seems then, I think this is from Interior Castles. Anyway, the Interior Castle. It seems then that this swift and dazzling vision of divine personality may represent a true contact of the soul with the absolute life, a contact immediately referred to the image under which the self is accustomed to think of its God. In the case of Christian contemplatives, this image will obviously be most usually the historical person of Christ, as he is represented in sacred literature and arts. And it says in the footnotes, another time I beheld Christ in the consecrated host as a child. He appeared certainly to be a child of 12 years of age, very lordly, as though he held the scepter and the dominion. Okay, so that's Angela de Fogliino, Vision of et Instructionem Liber. That means book, I think. But that was interesting. That's one of the footnotes. So that wasn't St. Teresa of Avila. That was in this vision, she says, in another place. Passes like a flash of lightning. That was her. You know, 12, the Jewish people count. They count the time in your womb as, you know, the 9 months. And so if the Jewish people are bar mitzvahed and bat mitzvahed at 13, they come of age at that age. Back in that day, they would count the 9 months or so that you're in your mom's womb. And so that's why Jesus entered, this is my impression, that he entered the temple when he was 12 and, you know, stayed and was teaching the rabbis and stuff and learning from them and said to his mother, well, didn't you know? Why were you looking for me? I must be about my father's business, you know, because that's that's the time he was an adult. He had to show that that was his aim, you know. The life-enhancing quality of such an abrupt apprehension, however the profound sense of reality which it brings, permit of its being classed not amongst vivid dreams, but amongst those genuine mystic states in which the immanent God, formless but capable of assuming all forms, expresses himself in vision as he had expressed himself in words. Certainty and joy are always felt by the self which experiences it. It is as it were a love letter received by the ardent soul, which brings with it the very fragrance of personality along with the sign manual of the beloved. This concrete vision of Christ has the true mystic quality of ineffability, appearing to the self under a form of inexpressible beauty, illuminated with that unearthly light which is so persistently reported as a feature of all transcendent experience. The artist's exalted consciousness of beauty as a form of truth is here seen operating on the transcendental plane. Beauty is capitalized and truth is capitalized. Thus, when St. Teresa saw only the hands of God, she was thrown into an ecstasy of adoration by their shining loveliness. Quote, "If I were to spend many years in devising how to picture to myself anything so beautiful," she says of the imaginary vision of Christ, "I should never be able, nor even know how to do it, for it is beyond the scope of any possible imagination here below. The whiteness and the brilliancy alone are inconceivable. It is not a brightness which dazzles, but a delicate whiteness and infused brightness, giving excessive delight to the eyes, which are never wearied thereby, nor by the visible brightness which enables us to see a beauty so divine. It is a light so different from any light here below, that the very brightness of the sun we see, in comparison with the brightness and light before our eyes, seems to be something so obscure that no one would ever wish to open his eyes again. In short, it is such that no man..." One second.
Why is it so... Does it hurt your eyes?
"However gifted he may be, can ever in the whole course of his life arrive at any imagination of what it is. God puts it before us so instantaneously that we could not open our eyes in time to see it, if it were necessary for us to open them at all. But whether our eyes be open or shut, it makes no difference whatever. For when our Lord wills, we must see it, whether we will or not." That's the end of that quote. There is another and highly important class of visual automatisms, those which I have chosen to call active imaginary visions, whereas vision of the passive kind is the expression of thought, perception, or desire on the part of the deeper self. Active vision is the expression of a change in that self and generally accompanies some psychological crisis. In this vision, which always has a dramatic character, the self seems to itself to act, not merely to look on. Such visions may possess many of the characters of dream. They may be purely symbolic, they may be theologically realistic, they may entail a journey through hell, purgatory, and heaven, an excursion into fairyland, a wrestling with the angel in the way, capital W-A-Y, like Jacob probably, he wrestled with an angel. Whatever their outward form, they are always connected with inward results. They are the automatic expression of profound subliminal activity, not merely the media by which the self's awareness of the absolute is strengthened and enriched, but the outward and visible signs of its movement towards new levels of consciousness. I wonder if you guys can see the waves over there. I'll move my book. It's fun to see the waves moving. Of universal light, unity of the of consciousness, new levels of consciousness. Hence, we are not surprised to find that a dynamic vision of this sort often initiates the unitive life. Such are the imaginary visions reported by St. Francis of Assisi and St. Catherine of Siena at the moment of their stigmatization. Stigmata, I think, The transverberation of St. Teresa, the heavenly visitor who announces to Suso his passage from the lower school to the upper school, of the Holy Spirit. But perhaps the most picturesque and convincing example of all such dramas of the soul is that which is known in art as the mystic marriage of St. Catherine of Siena. We have already seen that Catherine, who was subject from childhood to imaginary visions and interior words, had long been conscious of a voice reiterating the promise of this sacred betrothal, and that on the last day of the carnival, AD 1366, it said to her, "I will this day celebrate solemnly with thee the feast of the betrothal of thy soul, and even as I promised, I will espouse thee to myself in faith." Then, says her legend, whilst the Lord was yet speaking, there appeared the most glorious Virgin, his mother, the most blessed John Evangelist. They call them evangelists if they wrote one of the 4 Gospels. So John did. The glorious Apostle Paul and the most holy Dominic, father of her order. Oh, that's good. That was her order. And with these the prophet David, who had the psaltery set to music in his hands. And while he played with most sweet melody, the Virgin Mother of God took the right hand of Catherine with her most sacred hand, and holding out her fingers toward the sun, besought him to deign to espouse her to himself in faith. To which graciously consenting, the only begotten of God drew out a ring of gold, which had in its circle 4 pearls, enclosing a most beauteous diamond. And placing this ring upon the finger of Catherine's right hand, he said, "Lo, I espouse thee to myself, thy Creator and Saviour, in the faith, which until thou dost celebrate thy eternal nuptials with me in heaven, thou wilt preserve ever without stain. Henceforth," one second, "my daughter, do manfully and without hesitation those things which by the ordering of my providence will be put into thy hands, for being now armed with the fortitude of the faith, thou wilt happily overcome all thy adversaries." Then the vision disappeared, but that ring ever remained on her finger, not indeed to the sight of others, but only to the sight of the Virgin herself. For she often, albeit with bashfulness, confessed to me that she always saw that ring on her finger, nor was there any time when she did not see it. Wow, that was to her confessor, I guess. End quote. It is not difficult to discern the materials from which this vision has been composed. As far as its outward circumstances go, it is borrowed intact from the legendary history of St. Catherine of Alexandria, with which her namesake, the, quote, Dyer's daughter of Italy, must have been familiar from babyhood. Caterina Benincasa showed a characteristic artistic suggestibility and quickness in transforming the stuff of this old story into the medium of a profound personal experience, as her contemporaries amongst the Sienese painters took subject, method, and composition from the traditional Byzantine source, yet forced them to become expressions of their own overpowering individuality. The important matter for us, however, is not the way in which the second Catherine adapted her traditional story to herself, actualized it in her experience, but the fact that it was for her the sacramental form under which she became acutely and permanently conscious of union with God, long prepared by that growing disposition of her deeper self, which caused her to hear the reiterated promise of her beloved. The vision, when it came, was significant, not for its outward circumstances, but for its permanent effect upon her life. In it, she pressed to a fresh level of consciousness, entering upon that state of spiritual wedlock, of close and loving identification with the interest of Christ, which Richard of St. Victor calls the 3rd stage of ardent love. That's a quote of that. On the same active sort is St. Teresa's great and celebrated vision, or rather experience, of the transverberation in which imagery and feeling go side by side in their effort towards expressing the anguish of insatiable love. Quote, "I saw," she says, "an angel close by me on my left side in bodily form. This I am not accustomed to see unless very rarely. Though I have visions of angels frequently, yet I see them only by an intellectual vision, such as I have spoken of before. It was our Lord's will that in this vision I should see the angel in this wise. He was not large, but small of stature and most beautiful, his face burning as if he were one of the highest angels, who seemed to be all of fire. They must be those whom we call cherubim. I saw in his hand a long spear of gold, and there's an ellipsis. I saw in his hand a long spear of gold, and at the iron's point there seemed to be a little fire. He appeared to me to be thrusting it at times into my heart, and to pierce my very entrails. When he drew it out, he seemed to draw them out also, and leave me all on fire with a great love of God. The pain was so great that it made me moan, and yet so surpassing was the sweetness of this excessive pain that I could not wish to be rid of it. The soul is satisfied now with nothing less than God. The pain is not bodily but spiritual, though the body has its share in it, even a large one. It is a caressing of love so sweet which now takes place between the soul and God, that I pray God of his goodness to make him experience it who may think that I am lying. Oh, that's sweet of her. Finally, it should be added, and that's the end of the quote, it should be added that dynamic visions may assume a purely intellectual form, as in the case of the Blessed Angela of Foligno. Quote, being thus exalted in spirit during the time of Lent, therefore, she says, I was joined to God in a manner other than was customary for me. Methought I was in the midst of the Trinity in a manner higher and greater than was usual, for greater than usual were the blessings I received, and continually were there given unto me gifts full of delight and rejoicing most great and unspeakable. All this was so far beyond anything which had heretofore happened unto me, that verily a divine change took place in my soul, which neither saint nor angel could describe or explain. This divine change or operation was so profound that no angel or other creature, howsoever wise, could comprehend it. Therefore do I say again, that it seemeth unto me to be evil speaking and blasphemy if I do try to tell of it. Wow. Okay, the next section is called automatic script. And she says the rarest of the automatic activities reported to us in connection with the mysticism is that of automatic writing. All right, so I'm gonna head back to the car, but I'll talk to you about what she was just saying, so we have something to discuss. Bye to the ocean. We're near it, but in the book of Revelation, John, the evangelist John, talks about the white stone. And George MacDonald, there's a book online you can get for free called Unspoken Sermons. And George MacDonald writes he has a sermon about this whole thing, about the white stone, and how John said, only God knows your name on this. I call it your God name, It's on a white stone, and here, I'll show the ocean as we're walking away. So it's one of those cool things to understand. It's like you have your own name in God. So, I heard this one mystic Christian talking about how the Buddhists think we'll dissolve into God completely. And maybe that's a way to describe it, but the way God describes it for us in Revelation through St. John is that each of us have a God name. Each of us have, it's kind of like I was just writing before this. I was writing at that restaurant over there that has all the flames. I was doing a project that I was working on, but that we're wrapped up in our personality, and we think we are that personality, right? And we're so tied into that, but really we're our essence. We're our God essence, And Christ, in a way, you don't have to believe any of this, but my understanding thus far is that Christ frees us back into our true essence and out from our personality. And so in a way, the Buddhists are correct in that, your personality has to burn away, but there is still a you underneath that. But our mind can't comprehend these things, you know. And so that's it. So these visions of union that these people are getting, you know, it's just like, I know the Native Americans saw a vision of Christ, like he came in bodily form to a lot of them. That's why they got taken in by the white men that came and tricked them and killed a bunch of them. And I'm part Native American, so I can say this, right? Because they were told, I mean, they knew the Christ wasn't as dark as them, you know, even though Jesus was dark, you know, he's from the line of David. But he was a white man to them. And this is a story that I've heard, so I don't know how much it's true, but is that, so, whoops, sorry if that was loud. What was I saying about Jesus? And, oh, yeah, so I was just thinking how the disciples, you know, they were fishermen, and Jesus says, throw your nets out into the sea, you know, and from now on you will be fishers of men. And he called Matthew, who was called Levi, or who was a tax collector, you know, and he called Zacchaeus, who was also a chief tax collector, up in a, but not as a disciple, but who was up in a tree because he wanted to see Jesus, you know. And so it's like, Jesus will call you in whatever capacity, how you're operating. He'll use what is common to you. God will call you in what is common to you. Now I won't get all into all the speculative theology of this, because C.S. Lewis in The Last Battle, and I think I talked about this in another video, maybe just one of my teaching videos, he talks about the Talmarine, you know, that was worshipping the wrong God, but God, Aslan led him into the heaven in Narnia, because he said, all of that you were offering to this one, you were offering as a sincere love to me, to Aslan, to the real God. But that gets complicated. I don't recommend worshiping a God that is not divine love, that doesn't call us, you know, the creator. But anyway, okay, back to the book. I wanted to talk about just something, but not just anything. I hope that was helpful for you. All right, automatic script. This form of subliminal action has already been spoken of in its earlier chapter 3, where two of the most marked examples, Blake and Madame Guyon, are discussed. As in the case of voice and vision, so this power of automatic composition may and does exist in various degrees of intensity, ranging from that inspiration, that irresistible impulse to write, of which all artists are aware, to the extreme form in which the hand of the conscious self seems to have become the agent of another personality. It is probably present to some extent in all the literary works of the great mystics, whose creative power, like that of most poets, is largely dissociated from the control of the will and the surface intelligence. So what if, because I was told never to go to someone that channels, never to listen to them, because other spirits can enter in, but what if she's talking about, you know, you have a clear moment where you're in touch with your soul essence, you know, who you are, with your mind that stops interfering. Like I have that picture. Let me see. I keep it in my wallet right here now. I can show you guys. Okay? So this is not channeling whatsoever, but I can show you this as an example so you understand. I cannot draw, but nevertheless, I drew this, so I guess I can draw. This was a Van Gogh. I have it on my refrigerator with my signature on the bottom right here. You know, and it's like a straight out photocopy from my my art book. But what happened was I was reading this book that was saying how to draw using the right side of your brain. The right side is artistic, the left is logic. And I got to chapter 3, and I didn't read more after that, because she said, take a drawing. So I took a Van Gogh drawing and put it upside down next to my notebook, right? And put your notebook upside down so that, when you go back to your notebook, it's right side up. And so I didn't know that I was drawing a handkerchief right here, or that those were really fingers, or his shoe. I remember, because as soon as you say fingers, handkerchief, hands, whatever, you draw your idea of it, You don't draw the thing you're looking at. And so what I'm expressing this for is so you guys understand, so you all understand, because I didn't say at the beginning of this, I've been a psychologist the last 20 plus years. I study this, I study mysticism. I have almost the equivalent of a master's in theology as well. I'm just always studying this. So I just want to express to you guys how, people can be in touch with a higher part of themselves because they learned how to shut the mind down. I stopped my mind, my logical left brain, from interfering with my artistic brain. It was just seeing, and time stopped, and I was in a different realm, it felt like, but I wasn't channeling anything. I was just drawing what I saw instead of becoming impatient and drawing my idea of a finger. And so this is what people do with spiritual path. They try to become their idea of what spirituality is, instead of surrendering completely and listening to God and going, where do you want to lead me, God? Where I don't have to understand where you're taking me. I go and I listen and I do. And someone helped me. They said that God will never ever call you to do something that's against like your deep integrity or something. I don't know how else to put it in words. It's like you might go into a random grocery store you've never been in and buy an avocado, but you won't throw that avocado at someone's face, unless it's like some despot or something, and you're meant to show some kind of point because they're abusing someone in the moment. Like I'm just saying an occasion. So if if it's telling you to do something destructive or wrong, but it might be something that seems wrong, at the moment, like wearing pants to church, if there's not a rule about that. If you're a woman, I don't know, it might seem wrong because your mom's like, no, you don't do that. And I was like, well, yeah, I do, and you're not just being rebellious. I don't know. Okay. So there's other examples that will come up, but maybe Evelyn Underhill will talk about something like that. Saint Catherine of Siena, we are told, dictated her great dialogue to her secretaries whilst in the state of ecstasy, which probably means a condition of consciousness resembling the trance of mediums, in which the deeper mind governs the tongue. Had she been more accustomed to the use of the pen, she did not learn writing until after the beginning of her apostolic life, because they weren't taught that back then, right? That deeper mind would almost certainly have expressed itself by means of automatic script. This is just what Evelyn Underhill is thinking, but as it is, in the rhythm and exaltation of its periods, the dialogue bears upon it all the marks of true automatic composition of the highest type. The very discursiveness of its style, its loose employment of metaphor, the strangely mingled intimacy and remoteness of its tone link it with prophetic literature and are entirely characteristic of subliminal energy of a rich type, dissociated from the criticism and control of the normal consciousness. You see, that doesn't mean it's channeling something other, anyway. So too the writings of Rollman Merswin, if we accept the ingenious and interesting theory of his psychic state elaborated by M. Junt, were almost wholly of this kind. So Blake, I think it was William Blake, right? The poet. So Blake stated on his deathbed that the credit for all his works belonged not to himself, but to his celestial friends, i.e. to the inspiration of a personality which had access to levels of truth and beauty unknown to his surface mind. Well, I mean, we all have access to that. We do. It's like looking up something on Google, but you can ask and you can concentrate, and you're just looking in to the heavenly realms. Read the quote that I put about Pavel Florensky. He says all artists, and even Eckhart Tolle says that, whether they know it or not, go into the heavenly realms. And they see their symbolic forms, and when they come back to the threshold of this earth, they put it in language that we can understand. That's what all artists are doing. But anyway, Saint Teresa was of much the same opinion in respect of her great mystical works, which were, she said, like the speech of a parrot repeating, though he cannot understand, the things which his master has taught him. There is little doubt that her powers of composition, as we might expect in one so apt at voice and vision, were largely of the uncontrolled, inspired, or automatic kind. She wrote most usually after the reception of Holy Communion, that is to say, when her mystic consciousness was in its most active state, and always swiftly, without hesitations or amendments. Ideas and images welled up from her rich and active subliminal region too quickly indeed for her eager, hurrying pen, so that she sometimes exclaimed, "Oh, that I could write with my hands, so that none were forgotten." Instead of dipping the pen in ink and taking the time to do that, because then you lose those thoughts because your regular mind can come in, or they move swiftly. In Teresa's unitive state, a slight suggestion was enough to change the condition of her consciousness, place her under the complete domination of her deeper mind. Often, she said, when composing the interior castle, her work reacted upon herself. She would suddenly be caught up into the very degree of contemplation which she was trying to describe, and continue to write in this absorbed or entranced condition, clearly perceiving that her pen was guided by a power not her own, and expressed ideas unknown to her surface mind, which filled her with astonishment. In the evidence given during the process for St. Teresa's beatification, Maria de San Francisco of Medina, one of her early nuns, stated that on entering the saint's cell, while she was writing the same interior castle, she found her so absorbed in contemplation as to be unaware of the external world. If we made a noise close to her, said another, Maria del Nacimiento, she neither ceased to write nor complained of being disturbed. Both these nuns, also Ana de la Encarnacion, prioress of Granada, affirmed that she wrote with immense speed, never stopping to erase or to correct, being anxious, as she said, to write what the Lord had given her before she forgot it. They and many others declared that when she was thus writing, she seemed like another being, and that her face, excessively beautiful in expression, shone with an unearthly splendor which afterwards faded away. As for Madame Guyon, which temperament had in it almost as much of the medium as of the mystic, and whose passion for quietism and mental passivity left her almost wholly at the mercy of subconscious impulses, she exhibits by turns the phenomena of clairvoyance, prophecy, telepathy, and automatic writing in bewildering profusion. I was myself surprised, she says, at the letters which thou didst cause me to write, and in which I had no part save the actual movement of my hand. And it was at this time that I received that gift of writing, according to the interior mind, and not according to my own mind, which I had never known before. Also, my manner of writing was altogether changed. And everyone was astonished because I wrote with such great facility. Like, I never drew before. That was the third drawing I'd ever drawn that I showed you guys. I never took art classes or anything like that. I tried to take one after that in Montreal, but it kind of backfired. But anyway, so it's just you're turning off your normal mind and you're getting into a deeper mind, like they're saying. Again, as soon as I began to read Holy Scripture, I was caused to write the passage that I had read, and at once the interpretations of it was given to me. In writing the passage, I had not the least thought of the interpretation. Yet no sooner was it written than it was given to me to explain it, writing with inconceivable swiftness. Before writing, I knew not what I was going to write. In writing, I saw that I wrote things which I had never known, and during the time of this manifestation it was revealed to me that I had in my treasures of knowledge and understanding which I did not know that I possessed. Thou didst make me write with so great a detachment that I was obliged to leave off and begin again as thou didst choose. Thou didst try me in every way. Suddenly thou wouldst cause me to write, then at once to cease, and then to begin again. When I wrote during the day, I would be suddenly interrupted, and oft left words half written, and afterwards thou wouldst give me whatever was pleasing to thee. Nothing of that which I wrote was in my mind. My mind, in fact, was so wholly at liberty that it seemed a blank. I was so detached from that which I wrote that it seemed foreign to me. All the faults in my writing came from this, that being unaccustomed to the operations of God, I was often unfaithful to them, thinking that I did well to continue writing when I had time without being moved thereto, because I had been told to finish the work, so that it is easy to distinguish the parts which are fine and sustained, and those which have neither savour nor grace. Wow. I have left them as they are, so that the difference between the Spirit of God and the human or natural spirit may be seen. I continued always to write, and with an inconceivable swiftness, for the hand could hardly keep up with the dictating spirit, and during this long work I never changed my method, nor did I make use of any book. The scribe could not, however great his diligence, copy in 5 days that which I wrote in a single night. At the beginning I made many mistakes, not being yet broken to the operation of the Spirit of God which caused me to write. For he made me cease writing when I had time to write, and could have done it without inconvenience. And when I felt a great need of sleep, then it was he made me write. Ellipsis. I will add to all that I have been saying on my writings that a considerable part of the book on Judges was lost. Being asked to complete it, I rewrote the lost portions. Long afterwards, when I was moving house, those were found in a place where no one could have imagined that they would be, and the old and new versions were exactly alike, a circumstance which greatly astonished those persons of learning and merit who undertook its verification. Wow, so she lost it, but she wrote it again, and they were exactly alike. Because just understand, it says, Jesus said, the Holy Spirit will come and remind you of everything that I have said, And the Holy Spirit gives gifts, some to be teachers, some apostles, some whatever, preachers, some prophet, whatever. So we each have different gifts in the Spirit. And so whatever book we write, it's in, if you understand what the Akashic records are, you can read Psalm 139 and understand. God knows it in the records already, but it doesn't take away your free will. I've had long conversations about this. A far greater and stronger mystic than Madame Guyon, Jacob Boehme, was also in his literary composition the more or less helpless tool of some power other than his normal surface mind. It is clear from his own words concerning it that his first book, The Aurora, produced after the great illumination which he received in the year 1610, was no deliberate composition, but an example of inspired or automatic script. This strange work, full of sayings of a deep yet dazzling darkness, was condemned by the local tribunal, and Boehme was forbidden to write more. For 7 years he obeyed. Then a new motion from on high seized him, and under the pressure of a subliminal impulse, which characteristically he feels as coming from without, not from within, he began to write again. The second outburst of composition, too, was almost purely automatic in type. The transcendental consciousness was in command, and Boehme's surface intellect could exert but little control. Art, he says of it himself, has not wrote here, neither was there any time to consider how to set it punctually down, according to the understanding of the letters, but all was ordered according to the direction of the Spirit, with a capital S, which often went in haste, so that in many words letters may be wanting, and in some places a capital letter for a word, so that the penman's hand, by reason he was not accustomed to it, did often shake. And though I could have accustomed to it, and though I could have wrote in a more accurate, fair, and plain manner, yet the reason was this, that the burning fire often forced forward with speed, and the hand and the pen must hasten directly after it, for it comes and goes as a sudden shower. Like when you're in Hawaii, it'll just sometimes rain out of nowhere, and you have no idea, and then it just stops, just the same. No description could give more vividly than this the spontaneous and uncontrollable character of these automatic states, the welling up of new knowledge, the rapid formation of sentences, so quick that the hand of the subject can hardly keep pace with it, that, quote, burning fire, the travail of his inner mind, and in vision so here the contents of that inner mind, its hoarded memories, will influence the form of the message, and hence in Boehme's works the prevalence of that obscure Kabbalistic and alchemical imagery which baffles even his most eager readers, alchemical, and which is the result of an earlier acquaintance with the works of Paracelsus, Weigel, and Sebastian Franck. Weigel is that one, and Sebastian Franck. Such language, however, no more discredits the, quote, power behind the pen than the form under which St. Catherine of Siena apprehended the mystic marriage discredits her attainment of the unitive life. Like just because it was similar to a story she knew in childhood doesn't mean Christ did not offer that to her, that she had a unitive life. There was evidence of that, In the fruit of such automatic travail, such as wrestling with the angel in the way, the mystic offers to our common humanity the chalice of the spirit of life. We may recognize the origins of the ornament upon the chalice, but we cannot justly charge him with counterfeiting the wine. We may recognize the origins of the ornament upon the chalice, right? We might have seen it in childhood on a different chalice, but we cannot justly charge him with counterfeiting the wine with a capital W, right? It's true, spirit. We have been dealing throughout this section with means rather than with ends, means snatched at by the struggling self which has not yet wholly shaken itself free from, quote, image, in its efforts to seize, somehow actualize, enjoy, and adore that absolute which is the sum of its desires. No one will ever approach an understanding of this phase of the mystical consciousness who brings to it either a contempt for the minds, which could thus simply and sometimes childishly objectivize the divine, or a superstitious reverence for the image apart from the formless reality at which it hints. Between these two extremes lies our hope of grasping the true place of automatisms on the mystic way, of seeing in them instances of the adaptation of those means by which we obtain consciousness of the phenomenal world, to an apprehension of that other world, whose attainment is humanity's sublimest end. All right, and so I'm gonna end right here. The next chapter I'll show you because I tell people, if you want to take a screenshot of it, you can. So I'm sure I'll show it again. Chapter 6. It's called Introversion, Part 1, Recollection and Quiet. Oh, good. And then, here. Whenever she says Eckhart, this book is from 1910, so it's Meister Eckhart. Eckhart's totally the guy that wrote The Power of Now, got his name from Meister Eckhart. Here's the synopsis, the summary of the next chapter, so that, if people want to look at that while we're talking about it. I'll just read some of it. Introversion is the characteristic mystic art. Its development accompanies organic growth. It is susceptible of education, the value of tradition, the training of the will and attention, contemplation, the only real way of perceiving anything. Its method described, good. She's going to describe the method. An experiment, introversion, ecstasy, the two aspects of contemplative consciousness, the ground of the soul, philosophic contemplation, the degrees of horizon, their nature, the end of contemplation. Okay, so I'll end with this so we can begin on a new chapter, in case, I don't know, people want to start on a new chapter. All right, I wish you so much love. thanks for being here. Like, share, and comment, because YouTube has no idea what I'm doing on my channel. Like, they don't understand how I have music, because music gets you into this contemplative state and it can heal you beyond your defenses. And I have this book, and I have, sometimes I put some skating, roller skating, because I'm in this flow state, and that can help you know this state as well. I'm just watching the sun setting, and then other teaching videos where I teach psychology and stuff. So share my channel with like-minded people, so that it gets out, because every time I switch the genre or the mode, then YouTube like shuts down and doesn't push out my videos, because they don't understand. They like pushing out to the same people the same topic. And so if it seems like it's something different, then it really shuts down their algorithm. So anyway, I wish you love, and I appreciate your contribution to this. That's how you can help me and get this to other people. All right, much love.